Over the past 2 decades, video games have reached a level of technological sophistication that enables them to immerse players in complex stories and relationships. The games require players not to draw only on their hand-eye coordination skills and puzzle-solving prowess, but also their moral imagination, as they navigate complex relationships and their consequences. Today's video games are light years away from Pong and asteroids, and they have the potential not only to offer richly textured narratives and fantastically realistic-seeming worlds, but to aid in forming us as moral beings, for better and for worse. Video games have long had a bad reputation among Christians. Whether their concern is about brain rot from too many hours staring at a video screen, or the damaging effects of simulated violence, Christians have worried about the influence of video games on young people, particularly young men. To be sure, the video game industry offers ammunition for that critique. But even egregious examples of video game violence often show some complexity. Games like Grand Theft Auto do not simply allow players to participate in the seamy side of American life. It offers an implicit criticism of American society, portraying organized crime as the dark side of laissez-faire capitalism run amok. While first-person shooters like Modern Warfare 2 throw players into situations of intense and morally problematic violence, but also allow them to enact the role of hero. Still, the underlying moral question remains. If it is true, as virtue theorists often maintain, that we are what we repeatedly do, then what kind of people do we become by playing video games? The answer depends in large measure on the games we play. A number of recent video games raise intriguing moral questions and draw the player into a complex relationship with the character they play, their avatar. Players are invited to explore their virtual world, acquire skills and powers, attract companions, and build relationships. The main plot is the scaffolding on which the action is hung, but the richness of the game lies in the way the player experiences the many other dimensions of play. Often a character's choices do not boil down to an easy distinction between good and evil. In many cases, the players are forced to make hard decisions about who will live and who will die. Frequently, a player's decisions affect not only the plot of the game, but also their relationships with their in-game companions. Team members have personalities of their own, and will register their approval or disapproval of a player's actions, even choosing to leave if their moral sensibilities are too deeply offended. Thus, players have to make choices based not only on what outcomes are best for the plot or for their personal power, but also on what kinds of relationships they want to build. This sense of identification between player and character is where the moral possibilities and risks of gaming lie. While concerns have been raised about first-person shooter games such as Doom and Medal of Honor, for most players these games seldom rise above the level of a harmless romp, because so little of the player's self is involved in the game. But open-world games, such as Dragon Age and Mass Effect, rely heavily on the deep investment made by the player in his or her character, their actions, and their relationships. And so it may be possible to draw moral lessons from the gameplay experience. If players are given the opportunity to reflect on their experiences and consider the implications of the narrative in which they're involved, they may come to distinguish between morally better and morally worse outcomes. Reflection is the key component. That happens when the game asks you to make hard choices and then shows you the consequences of your actions. In this sense, a well-constructed video game offers the same moral opportunities to reflect on action and its consequences that a good novel or movie does. Like a good novel or a movie, a good video game tells a great story without being overly didactic. Video games are at their best when they raise moral issues without providing ready-made answers. Games that require difficult moral decisions, that recognize no obvious hard and fast distinction between right and wrong, are far more intellectually rewarding than those in which the white hats are easily distinguishable from the black hats. Such games are more reflective of actual moral decision-making and provide fodder for deeper reflection than binary games allow. The need for deeper ethical reflection is especially apparent in the way some video games approach sex and violence. Many games offer at least some possibilities for romance. As relationships develop between the player's avatar and his or her companions, it becomes possible to move those relationships in the direction of increasing intimacy. Depending on how the player decides to act, this can lead to more or less explicit sex scenes. While these scenes are in some sense the payoff, for properly handling dialogue options, it is possible in some cases for the player to seek a more emotionally intimate relationship before moving things to the virtual bedroom. As for violence, many popular games encourage the player to hack, slash, shoot, and slay his or her way from one level to the next. On the rare occasions when the game offers the player the option of avoiding violence through negotiation or dialogue, it's usually a temporary respite, as there's always another bigger, badder guy in the next cavern who won't be nearly as interested in negotiating. Video games have the potential to create provocative and possibly transformative stories through which players might come to a deeper level of moral self-understanding. At this stage of their evolution, however, they're a long way from offering the tools of moral reflection necessary for understanding the implications of in-game actions in real-world terms. Only a community of moral reflection, such as the Church, can illumine the relationship between ourselves as avatars and ourselves as moral agents.